Okay, now we're in business. Well, I teach at Westchester University, which is outside Philadelphia here, and I've been 20 years. Among other things, I direct the certificate programs in education for sustainability. But what is most perhaps of interest to you folks here is that I'm participating in a National Science Foundation grant in the School District of Philadelphia with a number of partners, doing teacher professional development around STEM with a sustainability focus. The idea is, can we use sustainability themes, and I'll get into what exactly that means, to drive more interest in STEM teaching and learning among faculty, students in the School District of Philadelphia. All right? And then likewise, can we use sustainability to catalyze interest in partners getting engaged in sustainability learning in the School District of Philadelphia? I've been doing this for the past year. The results are certainly gratifying, but I want to give you the context of this because I'm interested in having a conversation about whether STEM ought to be oriented perhaps more deliberately toward sustainability objectives. All right? So that's the title of the talk. What is education for sustainability? I want to emphasize the four. All right? The big question is, of course, if we're not currently educating for sustainability, what are we educating for? What is it?
I said hello.
Hello, good, yeah. What are we educating for? Thank you. That was a praise to Jesus. Good. That's what we're going to do. So that's the big question. It's education for what? Now the hype, of course, and if you take classes like with me, you'll say, well, typically it's education for maybe personal development, or this should look familiar, workforce development, or responsible citizenship, and that's all fine. The reality, and this is what you folks are engaged in, diverse STEM workforce for the 21st century. And that is a lot to unpack, and I want to do that because that's really critical to, I think, what we're doing this century, all right? So some questions, just to sort of get things rolling. What else is or will be happening in the 21st century? We use that all the time. What is our vision of the future, all right? Does it reflect the most important trends, realities, and aspirations? Likewise, what is a just, diverse, prosperous, sustainable vision of the 21st and maybe we should go 22nd centuries look like? And what, despite our best intentions, are we actually educating for? And this is important because, actually, we missed one. There is an unintended reality, perhaps, of what we're actually educating for. Is it distraction, unhappiness, economic inequality, environmental degradation? Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking that this is what they want to do, but sometimes this is what happens. So let's talk about the culture of distraction, because this is partly maybe why young people get lost in what this education is really for. This has a personal aspect. I'm as guilty as anybody. But also, as North Americans, we tend to live in a bubble. All right? This applies to most everyone here. You know the story. If you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. 2 languages, you're bilingual. 1 language, you're an American. This does not apply to everybody, but you get the idea. So there's that sense of not always being global, but there's also blind spots within the country. There are realities. I live in suburbia, basically, all right? And I have students who have no idea what's going on within 100 miles of them. There's a reality that they've never seen, okay? So there's all kinds of micro bubbles as well. So the question is, what's outside that bubble? Because whatever's out there ought to be part of our conversation about what we're educating for, yes? So one aspect of this, of course, is our pharmaceutical fascination, all right? Here it is, in terms of global antidepressant use per 1,000 people. The only country that comes close is Iceland, where it's cold, dark, and depressing all the time, although they're doing really well in the World Cup now, which is interesting. So this is an interesting reality. So what are we educating for if we have the highest number of people requiring antidepressants? Likewise, the richest 300 people in the world control as much wealth as the poorest 3 billion. What are we educating for? All right? Inequality. And this breaks down along racial and ethnic lines, of course. Hourly rates. African Americans, $18.50. White Americans, $25.25. So that's part of the big reality as well, and I know you're well aware of this. And then there's the environmental piece. Humanity is having a huge impact on the planet. Not equally, of course. Some of us are having a bigger impact than others. Now, I like to use the date 2050 because it sounds like some far-off future, right? Some sci-fi history. But this is actually very much in our lives. So I'm going to ask you, how old will you be in 2050? Well, I know I will be retired and quite possibly expired. But think about this in terms of your students. How old will they be in 2050? All right? Those middle schoolers, those high schoolers. Are they going to be around? You betcha. All right? So what's going on? What are the predictions, the trends for 2050? Well, I know when I was born, there were roughly 3 billion people on the planet. In my lifetime, the population of the planet has more than doubled. All right? By 2050, it's projected to go up to 9 billion people. All right? And all those people, this is the want to live like us, or live like me. Can it happen? Well, actually, no. It's basically a Ponzi scheme. You know, remember Bernie Madoff, the guy who made off with all the money? People get in early, you did good. Right now, if everybody on the planet lived like me, we need about 5 planets to produce the resources, clothing, materials for housing, etc., absorb the wastes. How is that just, fair, and equitable? All right? Those are the fundamental questions we need to be asking. Okay? So here's the consumption. Here's chubby United States consuming far more than our fair share. All right? And so when we think about educating for a future in the 21st century, the rest of the world is thinking about this as well, about fairness. Why do you folks get it and we don't? All right? And how does that become part of the conversation? We're also, of course, in the midst of the 6th mass extinction. That's not an actual photo. But the last time we had a mass extinction was roughly 65 million years ago. Asteroid hit the Yucatan, ruined spring break for all the dinosaurs hanging out there then. And now we are in the midst of this. And this is essential because all those species perform critical ecosystem services with no charge. All right? We depend on all of that. And yet we're sort of cavalierly wiping it out, thinking it's all about the humans, correct? So we have, of course, the big one, climate change, which is, you could argue, the challenge of the 21st century. All right? 2015, hottest year on record. What do you think 2016 was? Hotter than that. All right? 2017 was not a little hotter because 2016 was an El Nino year. But we see the trend. This is not a hoax. This is not some scientific fantasy. This is reality. It's difficult, okay? And so there you have it. So how do we operate in that context? Okay? The results of this, Superstorm Sandy. Oh, goodbye. Somebody left the meeting. That's like a vote for a no. You have been recording these. You can print recording. Hey, James, can I ask you to hit the X on that? That's all right. It's really good. All right. So we got. What? Hey, Jamie, can I ask you to hit the X?
You can.
Dr. Branson, can I ask you? There we go. All right. So we'll give it the unfortunate. You've seen the Superstorm Sandy, but mostly last year in Houston, affecting all sorts of people. In Florida. Then most Puerto Rico. We found out just recently thousands of people died. Not just a few, but thousands. This is impacting everybody, all right? So that's the reality outside the bubble in which we are educating or not, whether we like it or not, okay? That's sort of the bad news. And we want to work toward the good news, of course, and we'll sort of get there. But the problem is, the world that we've created is an apparent result of educated people, right? Who make lots of money, dress nicely, and in many ways are creating the problems that we suffer. Now, nobody wakes in the morning thinking about this, as I've said. But some people have described this as the 21st century canyon, all right? We have some challenging times ahead. Right now, 2018, we've got to get through this century, through these rough waters, and we have to think about how young people, all young people, are going to manage the turbulence and come out the other side when we hopefully have calmer waters, so that we have a decent planet on which to lead long, happy, just, equitable lives. All right? That's the challenge. So think about this. This is what's, for a lot of folks, this is what they already are on, and this is what folks are going to be on. You can think about this also as being on a train, all right? We have a civilizational train that's heading in this direction, and science is telling us if we continue in this direction, we know what's going to happen, all right? But every day we're adding more people to the planet, and mostly what we've been doing to address our problems is do things like greening. You know, we have our tech stuff. We can make it a Tesla train. We can put solar panels on the roof of the train. We can do all kinds of things. But what's the problem? Still on the train. We're still heading in that direction. We've made an unsustainable economic and social system somewhat less unsustainable. You know, if you throw smoke 3 packs a day and you drop it to 2, that's better. But what's the problem? You're still smoking 2 packs a day. You're still addicted, all right? And that's the issue. So the fundamental question I see is, why are we stuck on these tracks heading in that direction that science tells us clearly is going to be where we don't want to go? Well, and as I keep saying, nobody wakes up in the morning, how can I educate for unhappiness, inequality, and environmental destruction today? Nobody does that. So what's going on? Well, we're kind of stuck in a worldview, a set of assumptions. Those are the tracks. The warning signs are very clear: social, environmental, psychological. Yeah? Because we're entranced by a particular vision of the future that we are moving toward. And I would argue that this is in all of us. And it doesn't get implanted through courses at school. It gets implanted through the culture at large, right? So, what, my friend?
Sorry about that.
I must have turned off the crowd.
The pop-up just said it ended.
Well, somebody left. Okay. Go pick it up.
You are in the meeting now.
This was the coffee break. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, we were talking about a vision of the future. I would argue that we all have in our head some vision of the future, what it's supposed to look like, and that it's gotten there by and large by just existing culture, all right? So, what is that vision? If you were to go to sleep tonight and wake up tomorrow and it was the future, how would you know? What would you see that would say, oh, yes, now I know we're in the future? What's it got to have? What does the culture tell us it's got to have for it to be the future? I've done this probably hundreds of times, and it's always the same answer. It's always hoverboards with flying cars, all right? There it is, and it looks like this, all right? So now here's the thing, and this is our vision of the future, all right? Now, I grew up with this, and what's What's wrong with that, you could argue? Well, I don't know.
The only color in the photo is the dog.
Exactly. It's like, what happened to all the brown and black people? It's all white folks flying around the world with no trees, eating food out of machines and talking to robots. All right? And yet that's sort of what we accept. All right? What happened to everybody else? Sent somewhere else? All right?
They
And so,
couldn't cross the border.
thank you. All right? They couldn't. We sent them back. Go home. All right? And so this is powerful stuff, because this says we know what it's got to look like. And if you're not in there, well, I guess you're not part of it. All right? So is this progress? And this looks exciting because, look, we got flying cars. This looks like the new Apple headquarters. All right? People, yeah, this is the future. All right? But is this the best we can do, is offer up some shiny things that make it look attractive, and then say, well, we want that vision just to then to be more diverse? Is that sufficient? All right? That's the challenging question. And again, this stuff is everywhere. It's Back to the Future. You watch the movies. How do we know it's the future? Because it's got a hovering DeLorean, right? But here's an interesting one. You know this movie? Blade Runner. Good. I know this is the crowd that would get that. So this is based on a novel by Philip K. Dick. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And yes, there's flying cars, flying police cars, etc. And the message here, though, was, yes, the future is going to have this because we insist on it. But it's also, if you saw the movie, a social and ecological nightmare. All right? The planet is dark. Everybody's shooting each other up. What is desirable about this? It is a high-tech fantasy gone wrong. All right? And it went wrong because people didn't insist on having a different future. All right? They had a one-dimensional future, was high-tech. That's it. And we left the people out. We left the planet out. We left our sanity out. All right? And so the new version, does the same thing. So this is kind of the future that we're headed toward. All right? Unless we articulate our desire to have a different one. So let's talk Black Panther. All right? So this is obviously, there are folks who have written, say, in The Guardian, saying Black Panther's great, but let's not treat it as an act of resistance because it doesn't change any circumstances on the ground for people of color. It's just a nice feel-good thing. All right? And I would argue, well, while that's true, and I'm sympathetic to this argument, what it does do is begin to replace the Jetsons, begins to put different visions of who's in the future and how we create that. All right? That's powerful stuff. You can't touch it. It's in us. All right? And so being able to have that in the popular culture is absolutely essential. So yes, STEM Power, Black Panther, it's really good stuff. People have written about this, how, the role of race and ethnicity in our visions of the future. Those are essential. And so now I want you to imagine, all right, what is our vision of education for 2050? And if it looks like just some gleaming thing, only a little more diverse, how could we do better? Now, let's think about the visions of the past. Here, in 1910, people were imagining the year 2000, all right? This is the future. And you see how much this stuff becomes reality, all right? So again, what's the problem here? Kinds of assumptions about the nature of learning, about who has access to learning, about the role of a teacher, all right? What's your job? Feed information directly into the heads, and that's it. Okay, the only color is the outfits. It's all boys, all right? That's it. So these kinds of things are subtle, yet also powerful, right? Here's some other visions. 1958, button stuff. Nobody's outside, of course. This is another theme. This is back from the year I was born. Now we've replaced teachers with robots because we can't trust teachers to do anything because, they're kind of... this is, as much as we get like Greenstein, I know this is like their compost pile or something, I'm not sure, but that's as much of the planet that we've got left in the future, right? From 1982. So is this the future? Just interacting with screens. And what's the reality of that? So anyway, part of this, and this is, I know, a crowd that's certainly receptive to technology, but I think we also have to ask some tough questions about technology, all right? How is it supporting a desirable vision of the future? And how is it, in some cases, preventing that? I'm no Luddite. I love my tech. But, if we are the masters, we ought to be able to make decisions, okay? I want to introduce you real quick to a book that I think is important in this conversation, all right? That's called Learning Futures by Carrie Facer. The subtitle is Education, Technology, and Social Change, all right? And what she does is address the myth, all right, that's pervasive in the culture that says this. Social and technological change in the 21st century requires that we have to adapt to a high-tech, globally competitive world or risk economic and social oblivion. Education's role is to orient itself and its learners as rapidly as possible to adapt to this future. Keep in mind, what she's saying is there's this future determined. It's going to be this, and we got to get ready for it. All right? And of course, this sounds familiar. What could possibly be wrong with that? We're trying to help our students. We're trying to get them ready for the 21st century. But this is what she digs into here. Okay? So the dominant myth asks, what sort of competition will our businesses be up against? What sorts of skill will our workers need? How can we ensure competitive advantage, etc.? And it all seems perfectly reasonable. Again, what is education for? But consider the difference here. When we're talking about preparing for the future, adapting to the future, imagining the future, or creating. Are we asking young people and ourselves merely to adapt to some vision that has been given that will benefit some and not benefit others? Or are we going to be expecting them to imagine and create a different future? I would argue, and this is obviously, we need young people who can imagine and create, not adapt and prepare. Total pivot there, all right? Because if we're imagining and creating, we're imagining ourselves into the future, not expecting other people to tell us what it looks like, and we're creating one that's going to be good for everybody, okay? Not simply buying into something that's been promoted for the benefit of those who currently have power. So the bottom line is the future is not something that is done to us, but an ongoing process in which we can intervene. And young people need to believe this, all right? So here he comes again.
You guys are about this. We need to.
Yes. Let's see. Well, people like me out. The one that says technology is the knack of.
Frisch?
Yeah, Max
F-R-I?
Frisch.
Okay.
Max, F-R-I-S-C-H. Arranging the world so that we don't have to experience it. People have talked about something called what's it called? It's like an experience. Our understanding of like engaged learning is like this now, But we have ears, we have noses, we have bodies, and so how can we kind of bring more of that experience? Learning through just Carrie Facer. The book is, I think, was done in 20, and some of the specifics in there about what's going on in terms of technologically and social. But the general idea still holds really strong. I'll be using this book in the fall in the course with administrators in schools thinking about education, how we ought to be orienting ourselves toward the future. Well, in a way, yes. But she's one who says, yeah, I'm a future, but I think we ought to be not predicting what's going to happen. So much of it is like, what are the predictions, the crystal ball, as opposed to, okay, forget about that. Let's start with this. What do we want it to be? Right? Who do we want to be there? How do we want things to operate? Then we imagine that, and then we create that. Right? So it's a very different process, as opposed to just some sort of being passive receiver. That kind of works. Okay. Okay, so the question, just to pick back up, here it is. What vision of education do we need that will enable all children and communities to flourish throughout the 21st century? Right? So this idea of visioning ends up being critical, I would argue. So Carrie Facer's argument is, here's the quote, the potential for socio-technical changes to massively amplify social and economic inequalities in the coming decades is significant. However, we will need... Whoops! Oh, I clicked on it. Hey, here we go. Yeah. That are physical, locally accountable, committed to viable and sustainable futures for everyone in their communities. So again, this is the idea of making sure that we have a democratic process of deciding what we want the future to be. It doesn't exist yet. And yet we have this idea that it's already there. But it's mostly benefiting already those who are benefiting. All right? It's not a fair game in a way. All right? So that's the book. So the bottom line here is we're always educating for a particular understanding of the good life, a particular vision of the future, a particular worldview. So whether we realize this or not, that's kind of what's going on. And so this means we ought to be paying very careful attention also to the content and methods and the structure and function of schools, because they are, in a sense, a reflection of these ideas that are taking us there. So here we'll run through a few quick assumptions. Assumption: learning can be reduced to individuals' brains sitting indoors at desks. Look at those images. That's what it is. Hands and heart, optional. Assumption: economic efficiency is the primary value. How do we know this? How many days out of the year are you allowed to take your kid to work? 1. Why? Because if we started sending kids to work 60 days, what would happen? Corporations would rebel. Why? Because it would be no longer efficient. All right? We have a society structured well for economic efficiency. It's not always structured well for people. All right? Traditional societies are nested. There's always multiple things going on at one time. We specialize, which has its advantages, but let's acknowledge the disadvantages. It's not always good for people. All right? And so people are lonely. And so people are depressed, which is why we take so many pills in this country. All right? So let's be clear about that. Other assumptions. Primary objective is consumption. Well, I go to college, so you can buy and throw out more crap than anybody else. Isn't that the truth? How do we know this is the case? Come December, everybody will tell us it's the holidays. What holidays? Well, for the dominant religion, which is consumerism. Right? We know this. Right? So, the classroom, the assumption, more technology equals better education. And I know this may rub a few people the wrong way here, but let's rub. Is it the case? Philadelphia used to have a report card, and they would indicate how many computers per child, or how many children per computer, the district had. The assumption was more computers equals better education. Is it true? It is not. If you have a fantastic teacher with crayons, what do you have? Fantastic teacher. If you have a lousy teacher with all the high-tech stuff in the world, what do you have? A lousy teacher. The teacher matters most. The human being at the heart of education. All right? So is this, again, the future? Because when we have these images of what the future is, it looks like this. Again, it's all white kids in sweaters. There's an outdoors there, but that's just for looks. All right? We're not have access to the actual community of experience, where we can make actual change in our lives. Okay? So here's another good quote, if you like this, from Henry David Thoreau. And I'll ask you before we get this started, would Thoreau have been a better writer if he had access to Microsoft Word? No. In fact, he might have been a worse writer. Things look kind of final as soon as you type it up there. But he's there, scribbling with a pencil in a cabin. Thoughtful. Sometimes the slow way is the right way. All right? We have many improved means to unimproved ends. I think we need to have a conversation about the ends. Where are we going? What are we educating for? Why are we doing STEM education? Right? What are we STEM educating for? Right? Fundamental question. Assumption: school equals education. That when we're in school, we're being educated. When we're not in school, something else is happening. But right now, if you're in prison, are you learning something? Yep. Probably stuff you shouldn't be learning, but you're learning stuff. All right? And so, all the time, how do we incorporate that systems thinking idea? So again, either we're educating for sustainability or we're not. If you aren't educating for sustainability, what are you educating for? All right? We ought to be able to fill in that blank. If you can't fill in the blank, other people are happy to fill it in for you, and they don't necessarily have the best interests of your students at heart. All right? So we need to be filling in those blanks. So finally, we can ask, well, so what is education for sustainability? Well, sustainability, in my view, I like John Ehrenfeld's definition, the possibility that human and other life will flourish on the planet forever. This is about humans. It's not about saving the planet. The planet's going to be here. All right? The planet has survived asteroid hits, all kinds of things. The planet's going to be fine. This is about people. It's people first. So education for sustainability is a transitional effort that works within current systems and structures. It's not about adding some new topic. It's about educating with the aim of bringing into existence a more functional way of being that will make possible the fullest realization of human flourishing for all people, now and into the future, within the limits of one planet. All right? Let me be very clear about this. Educating for sustainability is a different civilizational vision. Either we're moving toward that, all of us, or we're not. If we're not doing well. All right? Because sustainability is for all of us. All right? So that's the paradigm shift. Okay? It is, in fact, a very different way. So I ask, how do we get off track? We need a new dream. We need a new vision. And let's borrow something from Pope Francis here. There he is. who came to the United States in September of 2015. And does anybody know what he came to inaugurate? Well, I'll tell you. The UN Sustainable Development Goals. The rest of the planet is focused on sustainability. All right? If you talk about internationalizing MESA, keep in mind that people who are coming to the conversation are thinking about sustainable development. And sustainable development is about ending poverty, no hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality. All right? It's about reducing inequalities. All right? It's about good jobs and economic growth, innovation. So there's a role for STEM education in a vision of a sustainable future. All right? It's not just one thing about trees and plants and things like that. Well, those are important. They're on here too. And climate action. Right? This is a full agenda for the future of the planet. So from 2015 to 2030, this is what people all over the world are working on. We tend not to hear much about it in North America, or at least in the United States, because we think we're done with this. We developed. We don't need to worry about that. The problem is we sort of have overdeveloped, all right? Because we're living a way that we can't universalize. We can't recommend for everybody else because it can't happen, all right? Because we only have one planet, and we're using far more than our share. That's why it's an equity question. So keep in mind the SDGs. Sounds like a communicable disease, but the SDGs are the vision for the future, all right? And they're all connected, all right? All of these are connected. So you have this idea of people, planet, profit. This is what's sustainable. Business right now has a single bottom line. We need to have at least a triple bottom line, right? Making sure we're taking care of people, planet, and economics. It's got to be economically sound, which is why if you look at any major corporation now, chances are they have a climate change officer, a chief sustainability officer. They're looking at making products where they have to do life cycle assessments. Sustainability, whether they like it or not, is a cost of doing business now on this planet. And our young people need to recognize that too, right? So what does education for sustainability look like in practice? Well, here in Philadelphia, the district has a Green Futures Plan, all right? In a majority-minority city, people think, why are you folks doing sustainability? Because sustainability is for everybody. All right? And that sometimes is a hard sell in the United States where we have gotten the notion that it's just for mostly wealthy white folks who live in the suburbs. All right? But when we look at it in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, we realize, no. This is for everybody. All right? And so here's education for sustainability according to Philadelphia. All right? Holistic framework to equip students, schools, administrators, families, community with skills, knowledge, and habits of mind. Prepare them to, and look, I highlighted this, create and contribute. They're not going to be passive receivers. They're not adapting to something. They're creators. All right? They have power to a world where economic prosperity, social justice, and responsible citizenship may be strengthened while restoring our health and that of the living systems on which our lives depend. All right? That is a robust definition of not just a little subject area, but an orientation for all of education. All right? So the core standards for education for sustainability look like this, ranging from cultural preservation and citizenship to economics, healthy commons, air and water that we breathe, strong sense of place-based. That makes it real and relevant to the people in their community, all right? And look at this, inventing and affecting the future, all right? There we have it, sort of my theme. Multiple perspectives. Definitely a place for MESA in this kind of a vision of the future. So now imagine, what's your vision of education in 2050, all right? Again, it could look like this, or it could look like this, all right? We break down those walls. Education is happening all the time. And we need to get young people engaged in the real issues in their communities and solve the real technical challenges in their communities. That's motivating, all right? We can have abstract or kind of notions of doing projects, but when we're dealing with real problems in our community, we get power. And we know that we can have control over our lives and that we can create a better future because we can imagine one, right? So yes, certainly part of this is leaving no child inside. So as we transition to a new, more functional worldview, we must change not only the vision and the content, but how we do learn. All right? This could be a course about education, STEM and sustainability. Are they getting the message there? No, it's the same. We've just substituted one lousy course for another. All right? And so how we do learning matters. I would argue that we learn what we live, right? And so this is basically the hidden curriculum. Because if I had to go back to high school now and pass all the exams I passed then, how do you think I'd do? Not so well. I would pass some because I've used some stuff already, but I forget. But I learned all kinds of other interesting lessons. Like you're always being surveilled, all right? The big accomplishment in my high school was putting doors on the stalls in the boys' rooms. Because they took them off, because They couldn't trust people what was going to go on behind a closed door in a bathroom. All right? We learn we're being surveilled. All right? We get used to that. We learn that stuff is disconnected because we go from physics. A bell rings and we'll go to English. No connection in between. All right? We learn the disjointedness of the world. But that's not reality. Okay? So that gets in us. All right? And we learn to expect other people to tell us how we should think about ourselves. Am I an A, an A minus, a C plus? How worthy am I in your eyes? All right? We learn that lesson. I have adult students come in and say, oh, I don't know, I think this is too difficult for me. I was only a C student in high school. Because they've internalized that, all right? And so those are the powerful lessons of school that go beyond the curriculum, right? So EFS is place-based. You know, all the lessons right now, you know, that if you go into a building at night and all the lights are on and there are 2 people there, what's the message? Energy is cheap and plentiful, we don't need to worry about it. And we learn that very well. You know, the health teacher comes out and says, health is important. And the health teacher goes out and has a cigarette and a Twinkie. What's the message? Those kind of lived examples are far more powerful than the actual curriculum. So what lessons do we want our buildings and grounds and communities to teach us when we're not looking, right? That's kind of what this is about. So education for sustainability is fundamentally about learning to think in systems, right? And that we need to understand those processes. And so from disconnection to interconnection. For the world of the sciences matters because you can't do science without thinking about things in systems. We just need to add sort of the human components, all right? So our model of sustainability is about embeddedness, all right? Individual within a classroom, within a school, within a community, and solving real community problems, all right? We're trying to build a kind of a sustainability STEM ecosystem here in Philly by working with community partners. That's our primary objective. Let me give you a little taste of kind of how this is manifested in the schools. We're working with the National Wildlife Federation's Eco Schools program, where students in schools work on these various pathways. All kinds of interesting stuff. It's all project-based. It's all about addressing real-world challenges right under their noses. So it's real and relevant and meaningful for them. And in the process, they get a taste of what it means to be active in creating your own future. Right? So my favorite quote for this summer is, it's easier to act a person into a new way of thinking than to think a person into a new way of acting. So the emphasis that like MESA has on doing things, that changes our minds, all right? If you go to Amsterdam, everybody rides a bicycle. No one has to teach you to like riding bikes. You're just there, and you do it. And then you learn to love it, because we're doing it, right? And so we do learn what we live. So I'm going to wrap up here a little bit by giving you a quiz. My contention is that as soon as you pop out of the womb, you're learning stuff. All right. So what's this one?
Ladies.
Thank you.
Sure.
Chevrolet.
Right.
It's all Friday.
There you go.
Nike.
Good.
McDonald's.
Okay. A little trickier. So we could do this for hours, right? All right. So you must have cited it in school, right? No. And so we just get this by being in the culture. And that stuff we learn. It's powerful, right? Because we're soaking in it. I remember when I was growing up, there was some Palmolive commercial. Madge, you're soaking it, you know? That's what we're doing. We're soaking it, right? And so, but there's other stuff out there that we might want to pay attention to. Yeah, that's a bird. If anybody knows what kind. But it's common in Pennsylvania, a black-capped chickadee, you know? Tufted titmouse, kind of a racy name. Bluebelly, red-bellied, excuse me, goldfinch, poplar, my favorite tree on Westchester University's campus. Not marijuana, don't go there. It's actually sweet gum. Original chewing gum made from this, right? Oak. And I should back up and say some of the things. The native peoples in this area, the Lenape, made canoes out of the trunks of these trees way back when because they were tall and straight, and they made a perfect canoe. You dig it out. Beautiful tree. Sweet gum, like I said, original chewing gum. Oaks, nice and hard. Maples. Sassafras, you make tea out of. Yeah? Ginkgo, ancient primordial leaf. And I can tell you most young people don't know this stuff, and a lot of adults don't know this stuff. And you say, what? Well, if our vision of the future is this, it is so what? Because this is what we'll get. We don't need to know anything about life. All right? But if this is our vision of the future, right, that kind of stuff matters. And I'm going to give you an example. Because right now you're doing a National Engineering Design Challenge. Is that it? Yes, yeah. There's another challenge going on right now, too. It's the BIOMIMICRY Global Design Challenge. All right? You can check that out at challenge.biomimicry.org. All right? Similar idea, but here's the idea. Biomimicry Challenge is an annual competition that asks teams of students and professionals to address critical global issues with nature-inspired solutions. The challenge is hosted by the Biomimicry Institute in partnership with the Ray Anderson Foundation, and Ray Anderson was the CEO of Anderson Floorings. They do carpet manufacturer, all right? They're the ones who started doing like the tile squares of carpets, so you didn't have to replace the whole thing, making them out of low VOC materials, perfectly recyclable, etc. So they're in actually the judging period right now as we speak, all right? And so this is a different idea. If you're not familiar with biomimicry, just give you the quick sense. It's basically a new idea that says we have something to learn from the natural world because we are inextricably part of that natural world, all right? And the reality is humans are recent journeyers on this planet. Life has been here for billions of years, 4.8 billion roughly, all right? Anything that is alive right now is alive because it solved a problem. There is intelligence infused throughout the universe, yes? Right here on planet Earth. And if anything's alive to solve the problem, those are the people we need to be apprenticing ourselves to, all right? Think about this. Spider. Pound for pound, silk is like as strong as steel. But a spider makes that silk at room temperature. No toxic chemicals. You don't have to have a Superfund site created at the end of it. Perfectly biodegradable. Why aren't we learning how to make materials that are strong and resilient and biodegradable? Why aren't we studying spiders? Instead, what do we do with spiders? We kill them. All right? That's our relationship to the world. All right? Let's think about this one. This guy, I teach at Westchester University, one of my colleagues, and this is really interesting. He studies hydrodynamics. You know, these fins of whales. Kind of bumpy. You'd think it to be efficient, you need to have it smooth. No. It turns out, you study this is far more efficient. All right? And now we are mimicking that to make wind turbines that have these scalloped edges that are far more efficient than anything else that we could design. And who did we learn that from? The whales. The man who studies this, his name is actually Dr. Frank Fish. All right? So I guess that's destiny. Hive mind.
We're way like half an hour.
Wait, okay, I'm done here. So the hive mind design, there's a biomimicry design process. Check that out. Yeah, I've got cards. And we'll wrap it up with this.
Yes.
We're done. Okay. So this is my final message.
Yo, listen up. This is your home. It's the only one you got. This place is pretty, but you can't live there. You can't even get there. So I repeat, this is your home. It's the only one you got. Cherish it, protect it. It's the only one you're gonna get. These guys, they're your neighbors. They ain't going away. They ain't leaving. You have to get along with them. So you have to learn to share. You have to get along. You have to learn to get along. Because they are your neighbors. They're not going away. Okay, all this stuff, the animals, the waters, the sky, the ground, the bugs, the fish, the tacos, the people, they're all connected. Everything is connected. They all depend on one another. If you ignore that, you're doomed. Repeat, doomed. Okay, so listen up. It's all one. Not two worlds, not three, one. Just one. So get it and give. Remember, all is one. Okay? Hit it.
I don't know how to stop it, but please stay right. I don't know if we have time for questions now, or do I take a break, because then we have this second. I want to start to have us think about what are we educating for, our identity in this. Again, different recognized for when they come out of our challenge shows that. Well, where are we going with this? Elevate our own thinking about what MESA should be going to. There's a lot of good information in there. But,
Yeah,
you know,
it's on the
just-
desktop here, so you can.
I just want to add for